All right, everybody. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Marhaba, assalamu alaikum. All right, today I have very important panel. Um, we are going to discuss one of the most important pieces to me of the Bitcoin future. And here I have two esteemed individuals. I'll allow Erik here to share a little bit about himself, and then Stafford.
Yeah, my name is Erik Hersman. I'm the CEO of Gridless. I think the way to think about what we do is we make off-grid energy profitable in Africa by putting Bitcoin mining on stranded power. We're in a couple countries now, Kenya, Malawi, Zambia. We have a couple more countries coming online in the next couple months. And I think the takeaway from this is that when you can stop looking at Bitcoin mining as just a way to stack Bitcoin, which is great, but also as a way to finance new energy infrastructure, it becomes super interesting on two levels.
So, Stafford?
Yeah, so I'm the executive chairman of a company called the Africa Bitcoin Corporation. We are a publicly traded company on the Johannesburg Stock Exchange, and what makes us very different from the traditional treasury companies is that we're not just focused on Bitcoin yield, we focused on human yield. So we've taken a private capital engine and we've galvanized it with Bitcoin that allows us to lend fiat money at low interest rates and then deploy that into Africa to black female SMMEs that establishes jobs. So as much as we measure BTC yield, we love to say that we measure human yield. And for us, one Bitcoin at the moment represents 5 African jobs in Africa. So the more and more Bitcoin we can raise, the deeper impact we can have on a human level on our continent. So we're very driven by that.
Beautifully said, beautifully said. So, Africa is often mentioned from behind. We need to get adoption into Bitcoin, into Africa through Bitcoin. I'm curious to know what your take is on that. Stafford, we'll start with you first, but just to elaborate, what makes Africa uniquely aligned for Bitcoin? Because on my end, I would argue that the use cases for Bitcoin already exist and are much more apparent. Please.
Yeah, the reason Bitcoin was built are the challenges that we face on a day-to-day basis accentuated in Africa. When I come to Bitcoin conferences, I always hear keynotes and I hear about debasement of 2 to 3% over 5 years, over 8 years. Where we come from, debasement of 2 to 3% happens in an afternoon. Right? So when you live in a world where the money debases at that rate of change, number one. Number two is you live in a world where the general can take away your title deed, where the relationship of your president to the American president could impact your economic situation. When something comes along that represents sovereignty, immutability, frictionless, those core attributes, the basic attributes of Bitcoin for an African is understood within 2 to 3 minutes. I find that my American friends, my European friends that I try to orange pill, it takes them a year or two. When we walk around in South Africa, in the townships where I grew up, I talk to someone about Bitcoin, they get it in 2 to 3 minutes. They get it. So we always say this, Bitcoin was made for us, right? It wasn't really made for the number go up, number go down, folks. It was made for us from its economic monetary value and its attributes there all the way through the proof of work protocol. In terms of stabilization of our grids, unlocking renewable energy, representing new forms of opportunities for us. So, if you take a look at AI, and you take a look at pristine capital, and you combine that with the intellectual capital that we have latent on our continent, we got 1.4 billion people. The average age is 19 and a half. More than 60% of them are below the age of 25. You combine that latent human potential with artificial cognition and proof of work and pristine capital, this is finally where Africa rises. We've always said Africa was coming, it's rising. Well, it's happening. It's happening on the African continent. And people are utilizing Bitcoin as a medium of exchange already. We've got circular economies where people treat it as a unit of account already. So you folks talk about this happening, come to Africa, it's personified already on our streets.
Amazing. Shout out Bitcoin Akasi as well.
Yeah.
Erik, same question.
Yeah, I think, it's interesting. As Stafford was talking, I was thinking about a year and a half ago in Malawi, we have one of our sites running, and the currency was devalued by 44% overnight. So people who were sitting on Malawi kwacha all of a sudden could buy 44% less than they could the day before, right? So stores had to shut down to reprice things. Airplane companies, air companies shut down to reprice things. That kind of thing happens enough in multiple countries that it's a problem. So it's very easy for Africans to understand, where can I put my money that it's safer, right? Now, and just to pick on Malawi a little bit, you can't have a dollar account. Most people don't have bank accounts anyway. If you have 85% of a population, maybe 90% without bank accounts, on top of that you have the inability to have it in even something a little more stable like the dollar, then all of a sudden you realize that Bitcoin is a very, very interesting and a great vehicle to be in. One last thing is that Afrobit Kibera is one of the most interesting circular economies I've seen, and it's in the slum. And you say, well, how does it actually work? There's 65 businesses who accept Bitcoin. Blink Wallet is like the primary wallet used. And you'll see people walking up and paying for their vegetables, ladies paying for their vegetables with it daily, all the time. Like, it's just happening. It's not staged. People are just doing it. And I think that's the interesting thing. You're saying, what happens? Adoption happens sometimes really slowly, but when it happens and when it kicks in, it spreads really fast, like a wildfire across these communities.
Amazing. So Erik, your company Gridless is finding stranded and wasted energy and then turning that into productive infrastructure. Talk about the reality of this type of business and maybe things that people don't necessarily understand about what you're trying to accomplish and do.
Okay, so let me start with Gridless is a venture-backed, profitable company. That's what we do. It's going to sound like I'm talking like an NGO, so I want to preface it with that first. So imagine, if you will, you're sitting in a village somewhere and you don't have any electricity. We don't think about this on our day-to-day lives very often because we're used to Wi-Fi always being on, being able to turn on an air conditioning or a refrigerator, all these kind of things. In their world, it's a little different. Imagine that you can't do irrigation in your fields because you don't have a pump because you don't have electricity, right? Number two, so your yields are less. Number two, you can't go 200, 500 meters down the road to a grain mill to mill your grain. You actually have to pay somebody on a motorcycle to take your bag of grain 15 kilometers to the next town over just to mill your grain, right? So all of a sudden, energy comes into your life. What changes? Well, all of a sudden, you're super happy. You're walking 200 meters down the dirt road and you can mill your grain. You've got irrigation, higher yields. You've got more security because there's more lights out at night. Your kids can study at night without paraffin fumes, messing up their lungs. The local clinic can now have lights on at night for when people are having babies or when you need to keep the medicine cold. All these things happen that are downstream of energy, right? So what we're doing with Bitcoin, and Bitcoin mining specifically, is creating an enabler for energy to happen in the places that need it most. And we make money, they have inexpensive electricity, and the power company is finally profitable. That's what happens.
Amazing. So my family in Nigeria, we actually grew up with this issue. My mother would often talk about having to warm our clothes on gas pipelines. So we have these flared sites which people are effectively venting gas right into the atmosphere, and it's very harmful for all the people that live nearby. But it becomes reality when somebody you love is then utilizing a gas pipeline to warm their clothes or to cook indomie. Without going to there, but to cook and to take care of themselves, right? So the propositions that you have is, well, let's turn something which was emitting gas and likely leaking into something which is productive and a powerful asset and used for energy.
Well, just real quick, Russell, on that, like anybody who knows about the gas flaring and mining off of that, Nigeria is becoming a real node in that global network now because of that gas flaring. There's 40 and 60 and 100 megawatt deals happening all the time now.
Which is absolutely amazing and a testament to the innovation which exists when you attach yourself to the Bitcoin network. Stafford, can you talk about the average villager, right, in terms of like how they interact with energy, right? Because we're talking about energy being a stabilizing force, but I think energy can likely equate to growth in civilization.
Yeah, I mean, I think we always talk about like Bitcoin being the battery for AI. I think it was Mark Moss said this. He says, AI generates economic energy. Bitcoin gives you the ability to take your time and energy and to store it somewhere. And I think the biggest challenge for an African villager is, where do I store my time and energy, where it cannot be taken away, it cannot be debased, where I can send it anywhere that I want to send it. Remittances is a big challenge. Where I grew up, people just don't comprehend how money works in African townships. The way time and energy is stored today is in fiat. And the informal economy in South Africa is 20 to 30 times the size of the formal economy and growing. But when we say informal, we always think about that as something that is not structured, etc. It's highly sophisticated, highly structured. When I grew up and I needed money, at 11 o'clock at night, my dad would send me over to a lady called Madums. I'd knock on a window would open up, and I'd say, my dad wants 100 rand. She'd give me 100 rand. At the back of her, when I looked over her shoulder, were mounds of money. Headache tablets, soap, shampoo, alcohol, and that I could get at election. An ATM when I grew up was a human being. A bank was a human being. And that was sophisticated. No one touched their money. The community was well structured. She provided loans. She provided funeral cover relative to that. What we see as an opportunity is to unlock that informal economy and digitize it and orange pill it into the Bitcoin world. When you go into that woman's life that owns that shebeen or that stockfell, who builds physical houses to put her money into. But people don't understand it. She's not building a house to invest her money in. She's building a house to physically put her money into the house, because she doesn't put her money into a bank. Right? So what we're doing is we're going into that world, providing loans so she can get more sophistication and draw more of that capital into Bitcoin. And when she does that, her life changes. Everything changes. Right? And that's the economic opportunity, I think, across Africa that lays dormant and latent today.
Very wonderfully said. And I want to hear you unpack the concept of Africa mostly being in a series of different informal markets. I'm curious whether you think people will begin to adopt Bitcoin proactively, or will it be a function of economic pressure?
I think a bit of both. I think what Erik said is it becomes this network effect. It just suddenly happens when it just happens. And what we're seeing in South Africa today, I think before Square made its announcement, I believe South Africa was the place that had more merchants accepting Bitcoin than anywhere else in the world. I think we hit 750,000 merchants. And that keeps growing. So, when you've got a population that's so young, average age 19, they don't care about shiny yellow metal, right? They've seen the 2008 financial crisis. They've experienced money debasement on a day-to-day basis. Bitcoin to them is an absolute no-brainer. They're going to adopt it. There's no friction. There's no skeuomorphic thinking about this asset class. And they're using it. They're using it as money. And when you use it as money, everything changes. In Bitcoin Ikasi, I was talking to Herman. I spoke to the founder of Machankura. And I asked them, what's the thing that you see in the community when people adopt Bitcoin? How do behaviors change? One of the things in Bitcoin Ikasi that, I don't know if Herman said it in Mauritius, but the amount of waste starts going down from that township. You know why? Because people don't spend their pristine capital on Temu and Shein. They don't go buy nonsense, because when you've got pristine capital, when you've got money that is valuable, to impart with your money, it has to be a valuable service. So what happens is the person buys qualitative services, the merchants have to provide qualitative services, gangsterism and crime goes down because it's more forward-looking. Kids that have certain skill sets in certain areas can focus on their skill sets because they're getting paid in sats. They don't have to go do 4 or 5 things to fund the thing that they actually love. So all the notion of the Austrian economics that Seyfriedin speaks about, etc., it's personified. It's happening already on the African continent. It's a beautiful thing to see.
That's amazing. Absolutely amazing. I want to come back to you, Eric. We're seeing quite a shift when it comes to the Bitcoin mining in the United States in terms of how people are looking at energy and essentially optimizing for its full usage. With the growth of artificial intelligence and the need for energy, we're seeing a lot of the hyperscalers come in and they're purchasing a series of sites and a lot of the power assets. What's your view on that, and how can Africa benefit from that, plus the innovation we're happening to see across the AI spectrum?
Yeah, so I mean, what we're seeing is AI pays more for energy than Bitcoin mining for sure, but also more than most people for anything. And so, of course, it's going to push Bitcoin miners off the shelves, right? And that's what's actually happening. So there's now, if you talk to different public miners, they have different levels of of warehouses full of pallets of Bitcoin miners that are no longer profitable to mine with in the U.S. And what we already see happening is those miners are going to be pushed to places like Africa who have really inexpensive energy. So as Gridless, we go out there and we do revenue share deals. That means I do not pay a flat fee for energy. I do a revenue share with the energy owner, whether it's a government or a private company, okay? And that means that I can keep mining even when the price is when the hash price is really low, okay? What this means on a global field, as this new emerging grid comes about, which is mixture of AI and Bitcoin mining and other consumer or retail uses, it's going to make a lot of sense for Africa to be the house of these older used miners, sometime in the future, the new ones too, right? Because it's going to be the only place in the world that we have cheap enough power that's stranded and doesn't have enough usage for it to work. And I think it's a natural bent. It's going to happen over the next halving, and I'd say over the next 4 to 6 years, you're going to see a massive shift in miners. So we've already seen that in Ethiopia. I'm not sure if you guys saw how they moved from 0 to 600 megawatts in 9 months and then just kept growing. We're seeing it in Nigeria with the gas flaring. We're seeing it, Gridless gets a lot of inbound pipeline. And so we see all these countries reaching out, asking, hey, what could we do with this extra 60 megawatts, 400 megawatts at a time? And so it's only a matter of time until more of those shift across from the West into Africa.
Can I just add to that?
Please.
So what we're seeing too, I have an interest in Bitcoin mining in South Africa. And what we're seeing
small Bitcoin mining enterprise of 500 megawatts.
You're not supposed to disclose that, Eric. So we have quite a big Bitcoin mine that's being built out. It's about 500 megawatts to grow to about 1.3 gigs. And what we're seeing is the hyperscalers actually chase after Bitcoin miners. And they actually make the business case stronger for Bitcoin miner, number one, because you don't have to sell your sats because they're willing to pay you a premium on the power that you have access to. But what doesn't get spoken of more often is the fact that when we sit down with them and we actually architect the site, they love the fact that the Bitcoin miners can give them a steady state of electricity from the power utility. The power utility loves the fact that the Bitcoin miners are sitting between them and the actual grid because they don't like the hyperscalers on their grid. What we're finding in South Africa is that hyperscalers fluctuate the grid. They actually have a horrible signature on the grid. So the grid supplier in South Africa, the utility, don't like hyperscalers because the power consumption ebbs and flows, it trombones the entire time. So if you put Bitcoin miners between them and the grid, suddenly the miners have the ability to instantaneously, when they're dropping down, grab the power, and when they need the power back up, release it back again. Yeah. And that's so symbiotic. And I think we don't speak about that enough, where you actually have Bitcoin miners allowing these hyperscalers to have a beautiful energy signature on the grid, and then it allows the Bitcoin miner not to sell their Bitcoin, which furthers their business case, which is extraordinary. And overall, we don't want them to sell their Bitcoin because that drives the scarcity. So there's this symbiosis happening. And what Eric's saying is we've got lots of
and what
resources.
You're saying, Stafford, is what we call Bitcoin mining is the economic shock absorber, right?
Yeah.
And so it can allow for that fluctuation that stabilizes the grid and deals with both intermittent supply of energy, if you're using renewables, and intermittent demand or spiky demand, which is used by AI.
And the problem that we have in Africa, we're jumping all over you.
It's okay. That's all right.
We can talk all day about it.
And the problem that we have is, like, if you take a look at energy in Africa, we've got generation, we've got transmission, we've got distribution. big challenge in Africa is transmission. A lot of our utilities haven't upgraded their lines. So what we have is these big funders have come and deployed enormous amounts of wind and PV and hydro and all of this stuff. But the problem is that power just can't get to the distribution to ultimately get to the consumer. And the only way you're going to unlock that bottleneck on the grid is to throw Bitcoin miners down at those points of generation that funds the build out of the transmission lines.
So unpack that some more, because there is a narrative which suggests that Bitcoin mining is more extractive than transformative, right? So can you unpack a little bit more, Erik, in terms of what he's alluding to in regards to transmission and places, countries, if not businesses in Africa being able to fund themselves as opposed to going out and looking for external sources?
Yeah, I think it's interesting, right? Like what we deal with in a small rural village is a microcosm of what actually happens at the state level. The state also has a problem with distribution of that energy. Costs them a lot of money to invest in those power lines, have to go long distances. And they often don't get a good return on that investment right away. And so in a village, it takes them a long time before they move from an LED light bulb and a mobile phone to plugging in a refrigerator or a hot pot. The same thing happens at a country level, where it takes a while to come into to ramp into that full usage of the energy that's there. So what Bitcoin mining allows you to do is soak up that excess energy and make additional capital so that it's not a bad investment to build large energy, which we definitely and desperately need on the continent.
100%.
One more question as we're closing up, guys. One concrete action that can be taken in Africa over the next 12 months. One concrete action that can lead to higher transformation, which can also support Africa rising. One concrete action. Stafford, please.
From an Africa Bitcoin Corporation perspective, it's constant education. Our governments across Africa are skeptical about Bitcoin, have ignored Bitcoin. Example in Namibia, where we just dual listed, Bitcoin doesn't have any legislative framework. It's not legal, it's not illegal. There's just a void. If you go through Africa, you get accentuations of this, where it's either like I just described, or it's all the way, if you have it, we'll kill you. So what action is, companies like the Africa Bitcoin Corporation is formalizing, is doing it within the rules, and enabling stakeholders, legislators, as we lobby them and educate them to see Bitcoin as this incredible asset class that will result in an African emancipation. This is our renaissance. And it's up to us to educate, personify, and show the world that it's not, we don't need to save Africa. Africa doesn't need saving. Just allow us to do what we know we can do. And I do believe the next Twitter won't come from Africa, the next Facebook won't come from Africa. I think the next Twitter of water purification will. I think the next Google of agricultural services will come from our continent. And yeah, that I think is the big action for me, is legislation and laws and rules.
Thank you. What you said, Erik?
Yeah, just real quick, I'd say that they say the story of human progress is the story of energy. If we want to transform Africa, we need to start with energy. And as energy is invested in, and you'll see wealth grow across the continent.
Amazing. Well, thank you all.
Thank you.
Invest in Africa. Right? Africa is definitely the future.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.